The topic of our lecture, the future of Holocaust child survivor testimonies in the 21st century, the importance of evaluation tool for best practices. As you just have seen in Yad Layeled core exhibition, we present 18 first-hand testimonies of child survivors who experienced the war and the Holocaust at different ages and different countries. We also integrate video testimonies in the other exhibitions and in the educational workshops. All the testimonies are given by authentic survivor as an adult. Together, these testimonies present a diverse and complex story of how Jewish children lived before, during, and after the Holocaust. The testimony of child survivors is both personal and subjective, and we believe the most appropriate and memorable way to present the experience of Jewish children who lived during the Holocaust in the museum space. Therefore, these testimonies are not presented as another prop placed in the exhibition in order to evoke an emotional response by young as well as adult visitors. Instead, the exhibition design gives agency to the survivor's story in his own words. If we look at the content of the testimonies, one can see that our master narrative puts emphasis on stories of life and not the traumatic experience of death. The focus is on how these children coped with difficult situations. Our basic assumption is that for our young visitors, these types of testimonies present an age-appropriate content to which they can relate, not identify or sympathize, but understand the perspective of a child in different situations. Video testimonies are one of the most meaningful components in the visitor experience in Yad Layeled. Therefore, it is important for us to integrate an evaluation tool that examines our educational work with these testimonies. We created a questionnaire that integrates closed quantitative and open qualitative questions. We give this questionnaire to the teachers at the end of their school visit in order to get their feedback on the museum visit. The feedback we received in 2018 demonstrates that video testimonies are definitely one of the most meaningful components in the visitor experience. In the near future, we plan to add sample of student feedback as well. So as you can see, the testimonies are a very important part of the good feedback that we get. As an educational museum, the video testimonies play a key role in our ongoing educational and theatrical activities. Our goal is to raise relevant moral questions based on the stories of young visitors' encounters. The accessibility of survivor testimonies has allowed us to incorporate new testimony beyond the core exhibition. For example, in an art exhibition, as you have seen in the corridor, my home there, we were able to add the testimony of a survivor, Shoshana Neumann, next to the artwork she created. In another art exhibition on the life and artwork of Paul Kor, we added a short clip from an interview Kor gave to his grandson. In our educational work, we have created a number of workshops based on specific Holocaust survivor testimony. We discovered that showing a videotape testimony in the workshop helps young visitors put a face to the survivor and connect them to the workshop topic. This is a workshop within the Paul Kor exhibition. Like the workshop, theatrical plays have always been an integral part of Yad Layeled educational programs. The theater-based activities allow the museum to broaden the context of the testimony and allow the young visitors to make connections, explore concepts, and express their feeling. One of our longest-running plays, The Dance of Joy and Sorrow, is based on the testimony of Leah Fried. Leah's testimony is in our core exhibition also. You just have seen it. In all three examples, we see the expansion of a survivor testimony in order to broaden the personal story. Holocaust museums are aware of the need to preserve survivor testimony and make it accessible to the public, while assuring the most updated and user-friendly technology that will engage visitors as viewers, who both view and use the digital medium in order to produce visitor-driven knowledge. Younger visitors who now have to be literate in digital, visual, and media platforms are expecting information sources to be more interactive and dynamic. One of the ethical concerns is that the media will be more attractive and interesting than the actual content. With the emergence of digital era and the declining number of museum visitors, Yad Layeled faces a new challenge adapting the visitor experience to the 21st century. Our discussion about the future of Holocaust child survivor testimony is grounded in the notion that any changes or improvement in the future will be based on the incorruption of digital technologies that will serve in presenting the authentic survivor and his or her personal story as eyewitness. So, choosing testimonies in the 21st century, digitization and interactive. How do we choose the testimonies that will be appropriate for the integration of more advanced and interactive digital technologies, taking into account that survivors' testimony complements and humanizes the exhibition narrative? A critical look at implementing more advanced technology should be deal with questions such as what are the goals of integrating the testimony? How are the testimonies manipulated to fit specific context, narrative, or age group? Our question is how to choose the testimonies that will be appropriate for the integration of more advanced and interactive digital technology.
In the past 2 decades, Holocaust museums, which see themselves as educational institutions, have created exhibitions that put on display the lives of Jewish children and incorporate child survivor testimony, either fictional or authentic, in various ways. Many of these exhibitions are specifically geared towards young visitors who are considered one of the major targets for the transmission of Holocaust memory. How have these museums incorporated survivor testimony? Some use composite fictional characters based on authentic stories of children during the Holocaust, like Leo in the exhibition The Journey at the National Holocaust Center and Museum, or Daniel in the exhibition Daniel's Story at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I think some of you, when you were walking through our exhibition, you were kind of reminded of Daniel's story in the way it's presented. And others have developed interactive touchscreen technology in order to create a virtual space through which visitors can select and navigate their way through a survivor's memories, such as the story pods at the Jewish Holocaust Center in Australia. And the most recent development is the USC Shoah Foundation's New Dimensions in Testimony, which provides the visitor with the sensation that the survivor is in the room with him or her. This new technology allows people to engage with the testimonies as if in a conversation by having the visitor ask questions that trigger relevant spoken responses by the recorded survivor, and we'll hear more about that in the conference. In the Yad Layeled Museum, we would like to keep using the original authentic video testimonies in the exhibitions, as well as in the educational and theatrical activities. But we would like to enrich the learning experience and make updates by integrating new digital possibilities. According to our vision, child survivor testimonies should be part of a holistic experience. The testimony by itself is not enough for creating a meaningful, learning experience that may evoke relevant moral questions and deep insights about the story of the Jewish children during the Holocaust. We translated this holistic approach into a triangular model in which there is a dynamic and fluid interaction between three vertices: core principles, child testimony, and learning activities. Each one of the three vertices can serve as a starting point for developing a holistic museum learning experience. If we think about a meaningful learning experience in the 21st century for our visitors, our young visitors especially, our goal is to integrate digital tools and media in presenting testimonies within the exhibitions, educational workshops, and theatrical activities. This process includes finding a dynamic, stimulating, and learning-based interaction between the testimony, the educational artistic activity, and the museum's core principles, or model, and finding the appropriate testimonies that are suitable for using new digital technologies alongside the traditional video child survivor testimonies. We would like to argue that in order to achieve this goal, we need a professional evaluation tool. Throughout the years, Layeled has upgraded the presentation and accessibility of child survivor testimonies in the core exhibition, such as updating technology, putting more than one testimony in each viewing station, and adding interactive buttons that allow our visitors to choose and restart a testimony, as well as choose a language. As far as we know, all these changes were made without any use of a formal and structured evaluation process, which is very typical of museums. In light of these upgrades, in order to improve the process of integrating new child survivor testimonies into the museum's exhibitions, we have developed an evaluation tool, an index for examining context and content. This index facilitates choosing the appropriate testimony for a specific site in our exhibitions, as well as creating educational activities based on survivor testimony. We defined 4 dimensions, each with its own criteria for evaluating video testimony. First of all, content. I think it looks kind of blurry, right? Okay, just asking. For me, it's a little blurry. Maybe it's kind of late and I don't know. Okay, so content. How do we evaluate the content of the testimony? What is the survivor saying? Media structure design. Which media structure and design will be the most effective for representing video testimonies and accessing knowledge and insights through them? Incorporation and accessibility. How do we incorporate testimonies in the museum space and make them accessible to the targeted audience? And the broader connection. How do we use the broader connection of the testimony and its relevance to the lives of our young visitors? For example, let us look at the testimony of Neely Gorin, which is located in our core exhibition as well. How could we enhance our young visitors' learning experience while viewing the content of Neely's testimony? What should be the media design and the digital tools that could make her testimony more accessible? How could digital tools contribute to the broader connection of a testimony, making it relevant to our young visitors? Here are a few questions and possible solutions we have as we evaluate the different digital options available to us today. What content from Neely's story could we enhance in order to make the viewing more interesting and relevant to our young viewers? A more interactive format may better highlight specific parts of her story, such as the booklets her father sent her while in hiding. What are the digital tools that will allow our young visitors to construct their own path to knowledge in the museum space? Should our visitors be allowed to walk freely throughout the museum? Or should the digital tools create a constructed path? Just because we make Neely's testimony more digitally oriented, does that mean that our young visitors have to stop and listen to her story? And how can we use digital technology to make the story of a survivor like Neely available outside of the museum? For example, how can we use digital technology to make the story of a survivor available outside of the museum space? Should we be creating a web-based platform from which teachers can work with their students on testimonies that they heard at Layeled? If we decide to create a web-based platform for our young audience, will that be at the expense of the museum experience? Or should the museum visit be the foundation for further investigation and knowledge building in the classroom environment? Maybe students from different schools, even in different countries, could learn together about Neely's story. We would like to see that the digital tools allow students to create their own way of accessing and interacting with Neely's testimony, allowing them to also deepen their knowledge in the most appropriate way for them. The survivor testimony is only a short excerpt from the life of a person. Many of the survivors have artifacts, photos, documents that can contribute to their life stories. Where should this content be stored? And how should it be made available for our young visitors? For example, we have facsimiles of Neely Gorin's little letters, which you saw on the slide beforehand that she received from her father. How could we make them available digitally for our visitors in the exhibition or in a workshop or in an activity outside of the museum space? The Ghetto Fighters House is a large archive, which you saw part of today, with many materials that are connected to the world of children. Digital technology can make these materials available to our young visitors as part of a workshop or a school project outside of the museum space. Being able to present Nili's booklets on a digital platform would allow our visitors to virtually touch an artifact that otherwise would not be available or accessible to our young visitors.
Okay, so for summary, no matter how Yad Layeled decide to augment our survival testimony with the digital technologies that are available today, our evaluation tool will be helpful in deciding which stories to tell, how to tell them, and how to make them relevant to today's young visitors, keeping in mind that it is the personal story of the survivor that we want to tell. The digital tools that we choose will have to balance between the virtual experience and the act of witnessing in order to create meaningful learning experience for our young visitors. The authentic testimony and the evaluation tool, which we talk about in our presentation, are the two anchors that we offer for the future Holocaust survivor testimonies. Thank you.